Good morning, everyone. It's sharp 11 o'clock in Helsinki, Finland, 9 in the United Kingdom, 10 in Central Europe, and I think I don't actually know how much Amanda will then tell us about the Sydney time. But anyway, thank you very much for joining this very interesting event on social media ban. It's organized by Stiftung Digitale Chancen and ECPAD International. I give a very short introduction before I start introducing our speakers and we go for the agenda. So about a year ago, social media bans were actually more of a national policy discussion, but now it has become a really huge global debate. Luckily, we have Amanda here today talking. Australia was the first country to require social media platforms to prevent children from holding accounts. But then we have governments in Europe, in Asia, in the Americas and Africa to considering these kinds of approaches. So it's not anymore on whether the governments at the global scale should act, but rather how they should act. As ECPAD International, our starting point is that children have the right to be safe online, but they should have the right at the same time to participate in the digital world. And these rights should not be mutually exclusive. And the challenge here, which we are talking today and hopefully also at the Q&A session after the presentation, is how we can face this challenge to reduce the harm while then also preserving children's rights and privacy and inclusion and also access to information while we are thinking about their online safety. And I think this is the biggest reason of why the debate has become so complex. So we have also other important questions like how effective is age assurance and age verification technologies today? What are the implications of social media ban for children's privacy and digital rights? What kind of responsibilities should fall on technology companies, on governments, parents, educators, and then also on children themselves? And I think maybe most importantly, is the restricting of access enough, or do we also need fundamentally redesigned digital services that will be safe by default for children? So I don't think today's discussion and the discussion in general is not about whether the social media bans are good or bad, but it's more about what we can learn from emerging experiences and what the evidence so far tell us and how we can develop policies together with governments and tech companies that will be effective and then also proportionate and grounded in the children's rights. So we have an absolutely outstanding panel today that brings together perspectives from research, policy, child rights, and then also from practice. So today we start with Sonia Livingstone. She's from the London School of Economics and Digital Futures for Children Center. She will talk about child rights lens on online safety. Then we have Amanda Third. She's the co-director of Young and Resilient Research Center of Western Sydney University. And our Jutta Croll and Torsten Krause, they will then tell us more about the most recent developments in the policy field, especially on the European Special Panel. And then Torsten tells us more about German expert commission. So without more explanation, I'll give the floor for Sonia. And just to note, we will then have an invitation and conclusion and farewell in the end of the session after the Q&A. Thank you,
Brilliant.
Sonia. Yeah.
Thank you, Salah, and it's a pleasure to be here and addressing a very topical question that has certainly taken over my year, and I suspect many others. Many of us now find ourselves debating the ban. Um, so we are here to address these questions from a child rights perspective, and I suspect everyone on the call knows, but just to kind of say what remains so important. The UN Convention on the Rights of the Child is the most ratified UN treaty there's ever been. It's international law. It speaks with authority. It takes a holistic approach to children's rights and to children, and it treats all their rights as interdependent and indivisible. It recognizes that they are. Privacy and participation must both be realized. Safety and children's expression, we need to find a way to allow all of these, and we need to do so in a way that respects children's evolving capacities as they develop from birth through 18. So with others here on the call, I had the privilege of supporting the Committee on the Rights of the Child in producing General Comment 25. And that really is the key document that sets out how children's rights apply in the digital world. And I hope and believe that it continues that sense of a considered and balanced approach that is holistic in recognizing children's rights, but that addresses the challenges of the digital world. And the challenges of the digital world are many, as we know, but it is the real world. It is not some virtual other space, and it is children's world. It's the world that children grow up in. So today's position, as one country after another argues for and brings in a social media ban, seems the very opposite, to put it simply, of that kind of considered, balanced and child rights respecting view. It seems it doesn't talk in terms of rights. It doesn't talk in terms of children's voices and what they are calling for. It seems to be delivering political quick wins. It prioritizes parents' voices over children's. It makes no reference to the kind of wealth of child rights mechanisms that have been developed over years, child rights impact assessments, best interests of the child consideration, and so forth. So we find ourselves, I think, in a dilemma that we perhaps did not see coming. Perhaps we should have seen it coming, but child rights organizations somehow seem lined up against public health organizations, many policymakers, politicians, and people here may know that many child rights organizations, together with many academics, have been signing letters and petitions to governments and sitting on commissions saying the social media ban is not the way that respects children's rights to bring about a safer and more inclusive digital world for children and indeed for everybody. In Britain, I watch the headlines as well as the policy, and the headlines make an extraordinary slippage from a social media ban to banning children. And sometimes that is the conversation. We are now going to ban children. Yes, ban children from the digital world. And we have tried to reframe. No, can we argue for a restriction of industry accessing children, the ban on restriction on industry, but somehow the phrase banning children is prevailing in the public mind. And I wonder in this extraordinary mix of voices where the industry sits. The industry, it seems to me, is rather quiet on this topic. And perhaps I'm hearing that the industry is more in favour of a ban than it is for the more considered regulation that many of us would have been advocating for some time. Perhaps if there is a ban, industry will no longer have to make provision for children's safety. They can cut even more of their trust and safety personnel than they have so far, and they will no longer be in the firing line of governments seeking compliance as they bring in more regulation. So I've been asking myself, how did we get here? To the point where child rights seems to be somehow lined up against so many powerful entities. And it was just last year that we were undertaking quite a lengthy process with public health, with policymakers, with parent groups, with all those others that we now seem to be somehow against, in advocating and marshalling the evidence for better regulation, for regulation that would embed children's rights in big tech regulation in ways that would bring about that better digital world for children. So we have Online Safety Act in a number of countries, the Digital Services Act, especially in Europe, with its all-important Article 28 guidelines, which really do speak in a child rights language. Most recently, we've had ECA Digital in Brazil, which perhaps is a regulation in a very sizable country with the power to ensure compliance against big tech, that also speaks in terms of children's, terms of risk assessments, children's evolving capacities, recognizing children's rights, and so forth. But we've hit some roadblocks, and the roadblocks also matter for children's rights. And one is to know how to treat a child in a way that is age appropriate and rights respecting online. We need to know who is a child. And I think the question of age verification and age assurance has come a little slowly onto the public agenda, but is really an absolutely critical issue. Unless we know who is a child, we cannot treat them as a child. We cannot implement a ban unless we know who is a child, but nor can we implement child rights respecting big tech regulation, as in the DSA and ECA Digital. So can we have child rights age assurance is a question that is, I think, still not quite resolved. Another major roadblock that we hit was Section 230 in the US. And I think in the last few years, we have pivoted as a community and as an evidence base from talking of regulating content, because content or is seen to put a brake on the First Amendment of the US and free speech rights. So now we talk of regulating systems, features and functionalities, the business model, the attention economy. But these are slow-moving parts, and it's taken time. And also slow-moving has been introducing regulation in one country, seeing what works, learning from that, introducing different regulation in another country, learning from that, seeing what works. Seeing what works is inevitably time consuming. We have to introduce the regulation, we have to bed it in, we have to wait for the enforcement, we have to track children's well-being. We hope to see that there will be a reduction in risks. We hope that there will not be a reduction in children's ability to participate. So, these things are inevitably take time. And clearly, the public has become frustrated. They have called a halt and said this is too slow, too ineffective, not moving fast enough. And we need to take a different approach. So the ban seems fast, simple, efficient, effective. Just take the kids off the platforms. I think we're going to hear today that it's not so fast, it will not be so efficient, and it will not necessarily bring about better well-being and better participation for children. And we have no evidence in the academic community that a ban can work. But we do still have the rising risks of harm. We do still see that and we are documenting this on all sides. We have very vocal bereaved families who are making a very powerful case that their children have suffered urgently and extremely, some to the point of death, from what has happened on social media. We do have continued evidence that the platforms are not taking note of all of these efforts, and the algorithms are still increasingly personalizing feeds which are pernicious, which are depressing, which provide children with ever more self-harm or depressing or undermining content if they have, once watched something. So we can see that there is a real problem, and I think now, the point to discuss is the dilemma for the child rights community. Do we call out the ban as not child rights respecting? Do we continue to advocate for the edifices of regulation that have been put in place and hold out hopes for them soon enough to make the difference for children? Or do we say, okay, the ban is now happening, we turn our minds to what should happen next? All the other things, the different ways in which children will now need to exercise their right to participate because social media has its very significant problems and their rights for civil liberties remain. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Sonia, for this very insightful introduction. I think we will already have a lot of questions then to be discussed after the other presentations, and I typed them down. So it's excellent way to approach this thing. Then we will have Amanda Third. She's the co-director of Young and Resilient Research Centre of Western Sydney University, and she will tell us a bit about the situation and the learnings from Australia. So please, Amanda, go ahead.
Thank you, Sala, and hello to everybody joining from different time zones this morning. Or this evening. I don't know what you call it when we're so fragmented. But anyway, thank you for being here. This is a really super critical debate, and I'm delighted to be able to share with you some of the things that we have learned in the Australian implementation of the legislation to remove under 16s from social media platforms. I do have some slides, and I'm just going to see that I can share those. Oops. Correctly, sorry. I think they've come up a bit clunkily. Have I got them? Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so firstly, I just want to acknowledge that I come to you today from the lands that are traditionally cared for by the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and this is the land on which our work has been carried out. I think it's been obviously, in some senses, an unusual moment for Australians because it's been all eyes on Australia around the world as we take this step to implement what is touted as the world first legislation to remove children from social media access. But I think what's been really remarkable as an Australian is actually watching the way that this has ignited a viral policy-making moment internationally. Tech Policy Press, who are tracking this very closely, have identified that 42 countries around the world, are taking steps, if they haven't already implemented, to put social media restrictions that are age-based in place to try to protect children's and young people's mental health. And I think what's been really remarkable is what is going on, that this is a policy that has caught hold so firmly, and why are governments so eager to act. I think, as Sonia said, certainly there has been too little action from social media platforms over the past couple of decades, and really, the public sentiment is that time has come to hold platforms to account for the well-being and rights of children online. But I guess. Also sitting at the heart of this is the fact, again, as Sonia mentioned, that we do have rising rates of harm Online harms have been on the increase since the pandemic in particular, and we have seen the emergence of new forms of exploitation and violence and abuse, including a 7,200% increase in financial sexual extortion and a range of harms that are being facilitated by generative AI. So I think it's really wonderful that there is this public or political will now to implement the kinds of regulation that arguably we have needed for a very long time. And, whilst we might say that, in fact, technology platforms, have not done their job, we could also say that, governments have not done what they needed to do historically. And so now that we're in catch-up mode. I think, though, what is the kind of right way to attack these challenges? I think it's very hard, often in the public debate, which is very heated, very polarized, to actually identify what the problem is that we are trying to address. Sometimes it's mobile phone use, sometimes it's social media platforms, sometimes it's mental health, sometimes it's online harms. I think we really do need to get much more precise about the problems and the challenges we're trying to address with the solutions that we're generating. In Australia, we have implemented social media age restrictions. It was a piece of legislation that went through the Parliament in record speed. It went through the Parliament in the lead up to a federal election, and it was embroiled in many of the political dynamics surrounding that election. So we don't have a perfect piece of legislation. I think the government is very clear about that. It will need revision. It will need amendment. And I think, there's a really robust 2-year longitudinal evaluation of the implementation of this new legislation underway. It's being led by the Stanford Social Media Lab, and there is a very robust international advisory board advising that evaluation. And we do hope to have evidence emerging fairly soon. We don't currently have anywhere in the world any evidence whether or not bans can or cannot work. And unfortunately, we do, as Sonia said, have to wait for the evidence to come before we can make those sorts of claims. And so really, I think one thing that I would caution against is looking at the Australian example and concluding that it either has or has not worked. I believe we're not at the moment where we can make that call. What we do have is some emerging evidence, and the first round of data collection has just been completed. The report is in process and will emerge any moment. So these statistics on your screen come from prior reporting. So far to date, the only publicly available data is really from studies that were undertaken by the eSafety Commissioner and others prior to the implementation, and then the first compliance report that was released in March 2026. In the lead up to the implementation, what we saw was that a very large number of parents, or of voters rather, not all of them were parents, approved of the restrictions. But as the legislation was implemented, there were growing numbers of skeptics about whether or not social media age restrictions could indeed solve the challenges parents and carers wanted solved. Research commissioned by the Australian eSafety Commissioner, or the Australian government actually, showed that 1/3, 1 in 3 parents would help their children circumvent the legislation, which shows you that parents were kind of divided about what the right approach is to regulating children's digital media practices for their well-being and their rights. Fast forward sort of 6 months or so, and what the first compliance report showed was that 4.8 million underage accounts had been removed by social media platforms as of the middle of December. And by March, actually, this year, 300,000 more underage accounts had been removed. These are the accounts that social media companies, where children had declared themselves to be of an age that would have been underage at the date of implementation of the legislation. What we don't know is how many users this number represents, because of course children will have multiple accounts. The disturbing piece of news coming out of the first compliance report is that 7 out of 10 children continue to have a social media account. And there are some reasons perhaps for this statistic, which I'll go into in a moment, but it's not clear from this first compliance report whether the problem is with the legislation or the problem is with technology companies' compliance with the legislation, or a combination of these things. I think the key thing to really call out here is that not all technology platforms have responded in the same way, with the same enthusiasm, and there have been some, the compliance report calls out some what Australians would call shonky practices. Okay. But let me talk to you a little bit about why we're sort of seeing some of this and where we're up to. Bear in mind, it's a staged implementation process, so platforms were required to immediately remove all those users who were underage. And then the next step was to begin to use age verification technologies and age inference technologies, whereby we use not just biometric data, but also to sort of dig deeper into users' habits, to look at who people are connected to, what kind of content they share, when they signed up, what sorts of things they talk about, how often and at what time of day, those sorts of things, in order to infer who might logically be a child. And so really we're only at the point now where, data collected from sort of May, June onwards would be capturing those most recent changes and implementation steps. So the legislation in Australia was implemented mid-December, and it affects all children under the age of 16. And what it does, though, is it prohibits children from having a social media account. It does not prevent children from accessing social media without an account. All right. And we know that obviously social media accounts are one way that technology platforms target safety features at children and young people. So arguably what the legislation may have done indeed is actually to have removed a key layer of protection for children and young people. And so this is one thing that the government is going to have to look at very, very carefully. The fines were originally 50 million. They've recently been doubled by our Prime Minister. And I think the government has progressively realised that actually implementing bans is not just time-consuming, it also takes enormous amounts of resource. And so, I guess there really has been a lot of talk here in Australia about how to strengthen the powers of the e-Safety Commissioner in order to be able to undertake the investigations that would enable her to hold platforms to account, but also what kind of enforcement budget is really required. This will result in some major lawsuits, we expect. So I think for those people who think of bans as a kind of stopgap measure while we sort of work out what to do next, I think the experience from Australia is showing us that actually the volume of resources required could well be spent perhaps doing other things, taking more targeted and direct steps to addressing the challenges we see, rather than trying to ban children from social media. There are exemptions for educational services and messaging services. But I think another major flaw of our legislation is that the applicability of the legislation is at the discretion of the Communications Minister. And what this means is that the Minister has to identify which platforms are covered by the legislation. So we are, in a sense, caught in a perpetual game of whack-a-mole, or as one commentator quipped recently, whack-a-marsupial, in order to make sure that children can be the legislation can be implemented effectively with children in mind. So this is one of the challenges. And of course, what it means is that it does create the dynamics whereby children are encouraged to migrate from one platform to another in order to avoid the platforms that fall under the legislation. There is also no exemptions framework, and I think this is really the critical thing. I think when it comes to thinking about children and young people and what they might need, we've been very, very focused on protecting them from harm, but we've really only been thinking about protection in terms of restricting their access to social media. We haven't been thinking about the fact that 2 decades of research shows that the best way to protect children is not just to restrict their access or restrict their exposure to harm, but also to strengthen their protective capabilities. We haven't been thinking at all about all the benefits that children derive from being online, the ways they exercise their rights, and the well-being effects that produces. Indeed, I would say that the world is being absolutely nowhere near as ambitious as we need to be as we think about what to do for children. It's not just how to protect children. Actually, we should be thinking way more expansively about what kinds of digital environments would actually support children's healthy and proper development, what kinds of environments are optimal, that is, for children and their rights. So the exemptions framework is one way that I think, where we've missed a big opportunity in Australia. Without an exemptions framework that says that if you meet these particular criteria, you can offer your social media services and products to children, we don't have any way of incentivizing businesses to design for children. We, in effect, let businesses off the hook because, as Sonia gestured earlier, when children are not in these spaces, they then don't need companies to design for them. I think the better thing for us to do actually is not to remove children from social media, but to keep them in place and to set very strong technical standards for companies about what they must do in order to build proper environments for children to engage in online. And in doing so, we incentivize businesses. We create a level playing field that then demands that businesses step up to the plate and deliver on their obligations to children. So I think, many people say, well, I would say that if we have to have a ban, there has to be an exemptions framework because there has to be some impetus and way of holding technology companies accountable to children. Bans are very difficult to enforce. We are learning here in Australia. Many children are circumventing the ban, the legislation, and we really need to be able to hold technology companies to account. But I think if we if you have to have a ban, it has to have an exemptions framework. But what I would really rather see us all do is to come together across jurisdictions, identify those technical standards, identify what kind of world we want our children to live in, and to then legislate those cross-nationally agreed standards into national legislation. And this would give us a much quicker route to addressing some of the challenges that children say exist online. So I guess the summary here of the Australian legislation is that we've definitely got a stick, but we don't have a carrot. All right, so some of the things that have been going on in Australia, as I say, there is this very large problem of circumvention. We are seeing children migrate to alternative platforms. And I think one of the things that parents and carers certainly didn't anticipate is that our children have become less visible to us online. They are pretending they're not on social media, or they're busy kind of moving into spaces where we don't normally find them. So I think this potentially creates a greater parent burden. Certainly there are privacy concerns related to the implementation of the legislation. And as I said, there is this problem of how we keep platforms accountable. All right, so what do we need instead? As I've already begun to gesture, I really think we need a much more robust and regulatory ecosystem supported by cross-sector coordination, where we really focus in on regulating features rather than platforms, or to put it differently, where we stop thinking about how to regulate children and their access, and we think in seriousness about what kinds of regulation are required to regulate business and transform the business model. All right, and I think we need to, all of this work must be done in partnership with children and their families. But really, I think this is where we need to head next. There are many other things here that I would propose as alternatives. But I'll move on now and perhaps return to these if people are interested in the discussion. Lastly, I just want to finish by saying that, in Australia, I think there's a very keen eye on not just whether or not the ban is keeping children off social media, but really what both the intended consequences are and the unintended consequences. I think one of the things that's often slipping through the conversations we're having about bans internationally are the implications for children's participation rights. It strikes me as, it gives me a lot of pause to reflect, to realise that, at the very moment that there's a decline in faith in democracy around the world, at the moment when children and young people around the world are saying that their governments are not listening, and not that they are disengaged from politics, but they feel alienated from democratic decision-making processes, it strikes me as very strange that we would take away one of the key ways that they learn about, organise and take action on the issues that they care about. Issues that are not just little issues that impact locally, issues that increasingly operate at scale, like the mental health challenge, like climate change, poverty, discrimination. I think what we need out of our next generation is for them to be able to imagine themselves as part of a global political constituency that is able to face these large-scale, somewhat intractable challenges. That's the kind of imaginary that we need our young people to grow up with, and arguably bans are militating against that very possibility. I'll leave it there.
Thank you so much, Amanda. That was so very interesting and very helpful, and also a lot of points for discussion. So for us to keep in the schedule and to have plenty of time for the discussion, we now have Jutta Croll from Stiftung Digitale Chancen, and she will tell us the latest news from the European Special Panel. Thank you, Jutta, for coming.
Yes, thank you so much, Sala, for your introduction, and also thank you to Sonia and Amanda for giving their insights on the situation. As a co-founder of the Dynamic Coalition on Children's Rights, together with ECPAT International, I'm very glad that so many people have taken the time to share this webinar and to join this webinar, because I really do think we are at a crucial point. With regard to the special panel, I can tell you that the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, already announced in 2025 in her State of the Union address that she would set up a special panel on experts to help her to develop a strong and practical European approach to keep children safe online. she somehow anticipated that the discussion would be diverse and would be led on national level in the European states. So she really early announced, we will try to have a European approach. And that is more the most important point on the agenda of the special panel, that we try to find a common approach to address the issue. With 450 million people in Europe, in the European Union states, this is a big market share, and it can has definitely also an impact on big tech when we will be able to come to a European approach. Although we have seen that many countries in Europe already have taken their decision or are in the process of taking a decision whether they are going for a ban or not for a ban. And thank you so much, Amanda, for showing us the map and making clear that some countries like France, for example, have already implemented their legislation, while others are on a way. I'm not authorized to tell you what the special panel will come up with next Monday on July 13th. The recommendations will be made public by the two co-chairs, which is Professor Fegert and Maria, oh, sorry, I'm just missing her name, but I will Dr. Maria Melchior from the French National Institute of Health and Medical Research, and Professor Fegert, who's also a medical from the Department of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry at the University of Ulm in Germany. So you will see from both the chairs of the panel that there is already an approach that is based on the well-being of children. But what I can also say is that children's rights have featured pretty well in the debates. So it's not only about their right to be protected from physical harm, but also from mental harm, and their well-being, their mental well-being is in the focus of the group. I would like to refer to what Amanda said as an opportunity for exemptions, and that is more or less pretty much also in the focus of the special panel when we are talking about the Digital Services Act Article 28 guidelines, because these guidelines are setting the frame for when, how and in which way the services and the platforms could create a safe environment for children. And once the environment is as safe as is attempted, then there would probably not be the need for having a ban for social media. So also the Article 28 guidelines are pretty much detailed in regard of the functionalities of services, and they go a bit beyond the Digital Services Act themselves, because the guidelines also address gaming platforms, which are so far not in the scope of the Digital Services Act. Nonetheless, the Digital Services Act more or less sets the framework, and that is also part of the whole debate about whether national regulations in Europe could even come into force or could be implemented, because the Digital Services Act is in the remit of the European Commission. It's in their remit to regulate the platforms, and it's not in the remit of the national governments to do any regulation. So although we are seeing these, like in France, the legislation that is already implemented, and that's addressing the young people themselves, prohibiting young people from access to the platforms, not putting the responsibility for the safety of children on the platforms, but putting the responsibility of the children to the children, and also to their parents, who should ensure that the children do not have access to the platforms. That could be done in the national regulation, but when it comes to the platforms, holding them accountable, it's always in the remit of the Digital Service Act, and that means on the European level. Just in regard of what the panel has done, the panel has met 3 times. First, the first meeting was more or less to review the risks and benefits for children's online use, and we are really grateful that it's not only a review of risks, but also the benefits have been brought forward pretty much. Not only, but also by the young people themselves who were part of the panel. Then in the second meeting, the panel discussed the already existing EU rules to protect minors, which is mainly the Digital Services Act with the Article 28 that does not only apply like all the rest of the Digital Services Act to the very large online platforms, but it does apply to all platforms that are accessible to children, and they have to ensure high level of privacy, safety, and security for minors. So that is more or less the framework. And as I said before, with 450 million people in the European Union, we do think that once the DSA is really strongly implemented and enforced across Europe, that will also have an impact on the global players in the platform industry. And the third and final meeting, which took place only 3 weeks ago, the panel reflected on the key lessons learned and best practices from the European Union and partner countries. And the discussion also highlighted how important it is to support children, caretakers, parents, so the whole social ecosystem around minors. So digital literacy, not only of youth themselves, but of their parents as well as teachers, social workers, was pretty much on the agenda. So last but not least, let me emphasize that the panel is strongly dedicated to find a European solution. This does not neglect everything that is going on national level, and Torsten will go a bit more into detail about the German expert commission and also the child participation that has been run in Germany. But it's still, we do think that there will be a much higher impact if we can come to a European approach instead of differentiated national approaches. Yes, that's what I wanted to tell you about the special panel, and please watch this space, because on July 13th, definitely we will also publish information about what the special panel has finally concluded and what their recommendations are. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jutta, for this information. And indeed, we will be looking forward to next week and hear about the conclusions of the panel. The last speaker will be Torsten Krause. And as Jutta already said, he will tell us a little bit more about the domestic developments in Germany. So please, the floor is yours, Torsten.
Thanks, Sala, and also, of course, to Jutta, Sonia, and Amanda. Hello and welcome to everyone who's joining us. It's great to have such an interested crowd with us in this webinar. Yeah, as we are running really fast through the webinar, I will try to focus a bit and will give you a short glimpse of what is going on in Germany. As well, of course, in other countries and states too, there are expert commissions, panels, whatever they call it, established to find out, to negotiate what recommendations necessary, what to do to make the digital environment safer for children. And so it was also in Germany. Our commission was set up last September. It's there are 18 experts coming together from several professions discussing how to make the digital environment safer for children, and they had the aim, the objective to work on 4 streams. So it's more or less general child protection in the digital environment, but also to have a look on health consequences, especially mental health consequences of the media usage, to strengthen, thirdly, media literacy, and fourth, to deal with the impact of artificial intelligence of children and youth. And when the expert commission was established, they had the great idea and have the thought that it is meaningful, but not just meaningful, because it's necessary to let children participate in this process, because all what they will find out, all what they will recommend will have an impact on children's daily life. And so in regard with the CRC Article 12, it's necessary to ask children about their views, their perspectives, their experiences, and what they wish and recommend to do to make the digital environment safe for them. And so it was decided that there should be a child participation process, and the Digital Opportunities Foundation was assigned to deploy this process. And so in the last month, we conducted 7 workshops, worked with 105 children across Germany and between the age of 12 and 17. And the children were from several social backgrounds and educational circumstances. And so that we have a variety and kind of a broad view in this part of our society. And the workshops were run not just in big cities and towns, but also in more rural areas, in the remote parts of Germany, traveled along distances across the country to reach them and work with them. That made a lot of fun. And in the end, we've collected 70 recommendations from the children for the expert panel, which we've handed over several weeks ago, and which were released in the next days at the website of our federal ministry, but also on our website. And what we found out is it's maybe not a surprise for people working with children daily or closely. So, but it was necessary, and it's good to have this data because it's current data on the current issues along the 4 work streams of the expert panel. And what the children told us was really clear. They see the platforms and services are responsible to make the digital environment safe. They do not want to have this responsibility by their own. They say the platforms and services are responsible to create age-appropriate services, to have age-appropriate designs. They must invest in safe environments, and it is necessary to create a safe and secure digital environment that we can take part, because they also said really clear they want to take part. They want not be banned. They are in specific cases they are fine with several restrictions, but they want not to be in general to banned out from the digital environment and social media. They also said, yeah, of course, there could be some more restrictions, but it's also necessary not to have this restriction, but to also to ensure that everyone will go along with them, so that when there are rules implemented, then everyone on social media in the digital environment should follow them. And if not so, then there must be also consequences. That's what we found out. Sozusagen the most of the recommendations are we can put in a kind of a basket called with the headline protection. There were several ideas. I will not tell them all now, but they were also really specific. So, for example, one also kind of a simple solution, but for the children really necessary. And it was pointed out in several of these workshops. They say it would make so much easy for us when there is the information close to the account photo of the user, how old the person is, so that no one can trick us that he or she is a young girl or boy and wants to be our friend, for example. Another big part will recommendations which fall under the headline provision. And the attendees told us they want to understand how the digital environment work. They want to know how algorithms work, why they get recommendations. They want to be media savvy. They want to be able for a safe usage. They want to strive along with a digital environment, with the social media, with all these opportunities, but they want to do it safely, and therefore they have to understand how it works, what impact it has if I decide for A and not for B, if I click here and decline that and something like that. So they want to be informed on that, and they want to learn about. And they also told us they want to be themselves to become media savvy, but they also want to be that their parents, that adults around them, that their teachers are media savvy, because they recognize so often that they don't know what's going on. And if they are in situations where they need help, when they ask for support, when they want to share experiences, then they too often are in situations with adults who do not know what they are talking about, because they don't know the service, they don't understand what's the fun of it, what you can realize or experience in the service. And if they don't understand that and don't know the service, they cannot help them to cope with a situation, to challenge situations, or to come along with them. And so they have a really strong pledge to say, we want to have competent, media savvy adults which we can reach out and ask for help, and which can on our side. And that could be parents, of sure, that could be teachers, it could be social workers. And maybe, I'm not sure because we don't ask it that directly, maybe they also want to have these media savvy adults that they can help them circumvent age restriction, as Amanda reported that 1/3 of the parents do in Australia. I'm not sure about if that's also intended, but maybe it's a kind of a precondition to have some knowledge, so also to help children to do that. So we had a lot of recommendation in this field. And last but not least, there are several recommendations in the basket of participation. The children want to take part, and they not just want to take part and accept what's them given by the services, but they say, we want to design our online experience by ourselves. We want to have more features or mechanisms to say the service, I want to see more of this and that, but I don't like X, Y, Z, for example. I like to use the feature ABC, and I don't want to be contacted by strangers and something like that. So to create your own digital experience, your own environment within the service, that's really necessary. And also, if they use current feedback mechanism, like reporting systems, they want to know what's happening. What is the service doing with this information? They want to get an answer and information on that. And they also want to know how this works, because sometimes they have impressions, if they report too much, that in the end they have restrictions by their own, but not to the people who them reporting on. And also, it turned out that they do not want just to create and to participate in their own online experience, but want to be participate in the shaping of the whole system. So, and that's also along with the UNCRC, even if they don't mention it, maybe they also don't know it, but they expressed that they want to shape the digital environment, not only with regard to their own digital experiences, but in the whole. They want to talk with the services, how they should be designed, so to attract children, to keep them safe, and to fascinate them. And also, even if they say, wow, it's really cool that we have these workshops here and that you deployed them, and also give us a positive feedback how we do it, they said, yeah, that's fine to have this workshop, but why we are not sitting on the table in the expert commission? So that's what they asked them, and it was really cool because we had in every of these workshops, there were partners or members of the expert commission, so they can talk this directly with them. All these recommendations, the 70 ones from the children, we handed over to the expert commission, and the expert commission revealed their recommendation to the government, to the federal German government, on June 24th, around about 2 weeks ago. And the expert commission, that's really a good result. Had a really clear stance, and maybe that's also a difference to expert commissions in other countries which we can see working on. They say the digital environment must be child-friendly. And the quote in the press conference of one of the co-chairs was, it's not the child who must adapt to the digital world, but it's the digital world that must adapt to the child. And that's the thinking of the expert commission. And that's also what you can read in the report on several and several descriptions and several articles, that there's a pledge to put the child in the center, and then go through the development stages and phases of a child, how children are developing capacities and capabilities, and think from these steps on what to do, what is necessary to keep them safe online so that they can participate. And also asking then, alongside this growing up of children, who is responsible at this stage or in this phase, and what can parents do that children are safe? What can teachers do? What is necessary in kindergartens? What can we have in support mechanisms and service in the field of medicine? What is necessary in child and youth welfare? And maybe also what is necessary, what can do maybe the presence of police in digital environment as another topic. So all at once, they handed over 56 recommendations to the German government. And one of the pressing question, or what all want to know in the press conference when they release is, what is about the age limit? And the conference did not clearly decide on that. They don't say we prefer an age limit. They give two choices to the government. They say, if politicians, if the government want to decide on an age limit, in this case, we recommend 13, and argued this alongside with the development phases of children, and also with their needs and rights, in regard also to that what Amanda mentioned in the end of her presentation, that it's a kind of a strange situation. We want to be citizens that take part in democracy, and ban them out from news and from relevant discussions, what they are, what's how to say, what's necessary for them. So we cannot keep them out from social media if we want that they take part in our society, for example. So if the government want to decide for a general age restriction, then they pledge for 13. But they say maybe another way could be more a risk-based approach and not to generally ban or restrict a service, but to say maybe this feature or this functionality inside the service should be an age label. So maybe live streaming is for the older ones, and direct communication from strangers is also for older ones, but it's okay to read, to comment, to post also for younger ones, but to have a risk assessment of every service, to go in this and then decide by every feature on their own and the situation created inside the service. So all in once, there are 56 recommendations. They are really meaningful. It's a really good approach and package handed over to the government. And now we will see what the governments are doing with that, how to handle it, if they are picking cherries, if they take the whole package. And I guess we will see also that the German government will wait some days, weeks, maybe also recognizing what the European Special Panel do, because the Youth Ministry, Karen Prien, but also the experts recommended to have a joint European approach, to go together and not every state alone having their own single solutions. And so we will see how that turned out in the next days. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Karsten. It's Torsten, sorry, it's Torsten and Krause. Karsten. Anyway, thank you so much, Torsten, for all that information. It's always so lovely to hear about the children's views. It kind of makes everything so much more meaningful. And greetings for those children if you are still in contact with them. Thank you everyone for these excellent presentations. On that basis, it feels like we should have at least 3 follow-up meetings to be able to sort of discuss all these topics that have been raised. And actually, I think it's a good idea to have those maybe during the fall so that we can open a more detailed discussion as child rights organizations. Do we have immediate, I thought we could first have questions. Oh, Jutta has something.
Yes, Stella, I have tried to follow the questions that have been put in the chat. So maybe we can go to these in the chat first and then trying to answer them. And I do think that maybe the first question could go to you, Sonia. It's from Claudia Silva, who wrote, I'm a researcher at the European Commission's Joint Research Center, examining the impact of virtual platforms on minors. In my research with children, I have heard them describe some platforms commonly defined as gaming platforms as social media. However, regulation has so far focused mainly on social media rather than games. And Sonia, could you give your expert view on the convergence between games and social media? I do think that it's in your remit.
Thank you. Delighted. Yes, I think the definition of social media has been challenging. It has an everyday meaning. It has a technical meaning in different legislations. And even the notion of engaging with social media, as we learned from Amanda, means, do you use it signed in via a profile, or are you watching a platform? And as we know also in the European Special Panel, that question of whether social media includes messaging. I think the European Commission has now said that WhatsApp is included as social media because they've added a communities function. Does it include gaming? And as we have tried to argue in our centre, children are engaging with a digital ecosystem. Children game while chatting on Discord, through contacts they have made on Instagram, by also watching other people playing games on YouTube. They are in an ecosystem and they share a lot of links and comment functions which keep a community of interest together. So from a child rights perspective, I would start with the fundamental, which is that children are seeking to engage with each other. And as they get older and as with their evolving capacities, they seek to engage more widely. I think, as Amanda very beautifully said, they are engaging politically because they are facing some generational challenges, which are going to also require a wide, if not global, scope. So I think a lot of parents are saying, why do children need all these friends? Why do they need 500 contacts? They could be friends with the 7 kids in their neighborhood or with their class. And there is clearly something fundamental driving children to want to engage in the social space that matters for their society, the social place where politics and participation counts on the scale that might have consequences. And also, I think, as Torsten very well put it from the children, there are very many different reasons why different children, because of their particular positionality, are looking to find people like them who are not in their immediate vicinity. So it's the social impetus. Then we have to map this onto our kind of clunky and ill-defined notions of social media gaming and so forth, and it just doesn't fit. And that's why I think many in this world fear that however tightly the policymakers and lawyers define the different platforms to which the regulation applies, children are a little bit like water. They will flow where the opportunities to engage and meet are, and they will find those places.
Thank you so much, Sonia. This is a very important point that you made. One very small detail of the recommendations from the German national expert panel was they were really clear. They want to have a ban on AI companions for children.
Mm-hmm.
So because they picked that up, and we saw that also in the child participation, that everything that is related to AI is kind of still confusing. They don't know whom to turn to learn more, and so on and so on. Like Torsten said before.
Can I comment on I saw
yes,
that
yeah.
Peter Jutta is at the AI for Good summit right now in Geneva. That's actually where I am too. So he and I might meet up. AI is being. So I think a lot of people in thinking about AI regulation, which of course we are too, are trying to learn exactly from this debate about social media. And the notion of a ban is transferring very fast. So I think already OpenAI has said no companion companion chatbots for children under 18 for children. And the ban will spread fast, but I think we need to reflect on the technology. So the companion AI is there in the chatbot that misleads the child or teaches them to love it, but it's also there in the AI tutor, which many governments have great hopes for. And it's there in the mental health bot, which many clinicians are hoping will advise our children because we can't afford the mental health services for the mental health crisis. So the common name for the bot doesn't map on well to the different ways in which it's being used. And again, I think we will find that we have limited children's opportunities in seeking to keep them safe. So we need better design. Yes.
Yeah, and I think the same would apply, Sonia, to algorithms. There's a big call here in Australia to ban algorithms for children. But of course, algorithms deliver many benefits for children, including good safety protection. So, yeah, I do think we need to anticipate these debates. I too would agree that is where the debate is going next. And I think if it's hard to regulate use age-based restrictions to regulate social media, I would say we are trying to boil the ocean if we were to implement that in relation to AI.
Thank you very much. I see another question actually for Amanda from Matilde Bausager. She loved your points, Amanda, about the need for an exemptions framework and to incentivize good digital design. But what should be this exemptions framework? Is there sufficient agreement between experts on what defines good design, and can it be distilled down to concrete features and mechanisms in a way that it can dictate what should be banned and what should be exempt?
Look, I think there is a reasonably substantial evidence base around the features of different platforms that are known to be less than optimal for children, let's say. I think it's something that if we were to create the right kind of environment for experts around the world to come together, to have a conversation about what those technical standards are, I'm sure we could give it a really good shot. There will be disagreement, but that doesn't mean that it's not a useful process. And indeed, I think actually to ignite that debate and to really turn those questions inside out would give countries a lot more food for thought about the approaches that they might experiment with, right? Because all of this regulatory work is in fact an experiment at this stage. And so I would like to see it much more driven by the evidence base, driven by sort of what we have learned from children and young people over the last 2 decades. I'd love to see us put in place mechanisms like sandboxes. I know that Joanna Nulla from the Child Online Redress Sandbox, which is a sort of a co-design entity that is targeting the design of digital regulation. I think these kinds of mechanisms actually potentially could get us where we need to go quite quickly, and certainly with perhaps a lot less expenditure on resource than it would take for each individual country to implement bans. So yeah, I do think there are really viable alternatives, and that it's time for us to get much more creative about the ways that we approach this challenge of regulation, and to be bold. I think really the moment requires us to be braver than we have ever been to date. There are genuine public health concerns there that do need to be responded to, even though the science is contested. We have to be able to draw conclusions about the actions that we should take. And I think, as I said earlier, I think really to date we've been thinking in a very small corner of the universe, and we need to really radically expand the sorts of options that we consider. We know from 2 decades that it takes an ecosystem of regulation to ensure that all children who are not equally unsafe online, right? All children can be as safe as possible and benefit from the digital world. In terms of what the exemptions framework looks like, I'm not going to be bold enough to say to make that call in a webinar. But yeah, I think there are lots of things that we can consider. Yeah, I'll leave.
Thank you, Amanda. I see Jutta probably has something to add or comment here, so please go ahead, Jutta.
Yes, thank you, Sala, so much. I really do think that, at least for me, I cannot say I've ever seen children featuring so prominently in politics. So it's the momentum that we have right now, that people around the world are aware of the situation, are discussing not always what I think is the best solution, but at least children have been put on the agenda, and politicians are considering to find the best ways to go forward. And I do think that is a really, really good situation. We are raising our voices. All of you who are in this call, I think, are raising their voices to come forward, to be more creative, to find better ways to make sure that children are safe. And what's definitely clear is the digital world will not go away. It will stay, and it will be the world where children are living and where they are exercising their rights. So let's take this opportunity to go forward, I would say. I'm now making an announcement, although we are not at the end of the debate, but this webinar is anticipating that we are going to have a session at the Internet Governance Forum, which will take place in Nairobi in Kenya this year in December, the week before Christmas, when everybody will be very busy, I assume, but still we are hoping that the multi-stakeholder advisory group that is setting up the program within the next weeks will also pick up on this topic, and maybe we can achieve to have a main session on this important issue. We see so many people have now joined the webinar today, and probably we will also have a good opportunity to discuss this with a broader group of participants than at the Internet Governance Forum. But back to you, Salah, because I'm not, I don't want to close the meeting right now, but I thought it's very important to make that point that we will have the opportunity to meet again, and maybe also in person.
Thank you, Jutta. And yes, excellent point and very important. And I think, like, we are co-hosting and co-moderating, so no worries about that. Do we have other questions now for the speakers, or maybe updates from your countries and organizations? We had almost 140 participants, so it's a very diverse group that's coming together today. I see Sonia raising her finger.
Well, since I'm at the AI for actually the Global Dialogue on AI Governance, and yesterday I wanted to bring into the conversation that the Secretary General Antonio Guterres made a speech which featured children and children's safety very prominently. And he offers a model that we haven't, I think, quite discussed yet. But it's a model that I see some child rights organizations reaching out for, which is to think about digital services as products and to call for their regulation as products before they reach the market. So as he says, we do not let medicine reach a child till it's proven safe. We test every toy, yet technology, he's talking of AI, but thinking also of social media, has reached children before anyone asked, and now we see the cost. So I think the argument for product safety and product testing in advance of entering a market can sound very much like a ban. We need to kind of navigate that. And I also hear many saying the ban language has itself become weaponized and kind of impedes our discussion. So I just wonder what people think of the argument that these are products. We should test them as we test any medicine or any toy before they enter the market. And since they impact children, we should know the safety first. It won't save children. Somebody made the point at my meeting yesterday, you can design a beautifully safe product, but people may still behave badly on it. And I think these are two very different challenges that we're facing, the kind of the bad actors within the space, but the design of the space. And I think our regulation can address both. They're separate points. So maybe this is a way forward. It certainly has the highest authority behind it.
Thank you, Sonia. I see Shireen.
Yes. Hi, thank you. And thanks very much for this very interesting discussion. So I'm calling from India, and I've been working very closely with our government here and the ministry on looking at, like all many other countries, how best to regulate. Obviously, it's a very different environment for the vast majority of children here, especially in rural India, who have shared devices, etc. But I wanted to ask a couple of points. One is to Amanda that are you saying that in a way the age restriction, I don't like the terminology ban, but increasing the age or having an age restriction is probably not the best way for countries to go because of all the difficulties, circumventing, etc., but also because it's hard to enforce? Is that something that you were saying is a learning, and definitely not as a kind of first measure? Because one of the things is because companies don't comply, and they really don't, then what is this at least something that we're protecting this age group? But I just wanted to clarify that. And I agree very much with Sonia's recommendation. I think definitely there should be testing before, perhaps a child rights impact assessment of products before, especially with AI. And again, in countries like India, they're looking at AI teachers, AI tutors, and no thinking about safety, well-being, etc.
Yeah, I would plus that one as well, Shireen, around Sonia's point. Yes, so I do think that if we're going to if you're going to go towards an age restriction policy, it's not a temporary measure. It takes enormous effort. It takes real commitment, and I think can't be thought of as a temporary measure. And not least because you intervene in a very complex system, right? I think one of the other learnings that I didn't talk about in Australia is that it's sort of, we have had many years of considered regulation to protect children online. At the time that the bans came into effect, there were 7 or 8 other quite major initiatives underway, such as a Children's Privacy Code, an online statutory duty of care, different bits and pieces, and all of that considered legislation had been premised on the fact that children would be in these spaces, right? And then you have the age restrictions come over the top and really has sort of in a way undercut the strength and the teeth of that other legislative work. So, I think banning sounds simple, but actually our experience is it's very complicated. It's not to say, and it is very difficult to enforce. I think, this is one of the learnings coming out of Australia, is that you do need significant resources, but you also need information gathering powers and, capacity to hold technology companies to account and so on. So yes, I guess I don't know the figures. I'm not basing this is an opinion, I guess. It's not that I know that it's cost the Australian government X amount of dollars to implement the policy, but looking at the effort that has been required, my sense is that if we could just target that to strengthening the ecosystem we were already building, we might have gotten where we needed to go more quickly and more efficiently. So yeah, but it's not to say that bans can't work. As I said, the evidence is out on that, and I think we'll be, watching things very carefully as they unfold and trying to think about how best to respond down here on this side of the planet.
Thank you. We're all eyes on Australia.
Yes, it's very uncomfortable. We're not used to that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. We are running out of time, so we only have 3 minutes. I'm copy-pasting a short introduction to the DC CRIDE to the chat, because that brings us together here, and we invite everyone of you to join DC CRIDE. And there will be some information on it in the chat soon when we finish the meeting. Do we have any final words? Because we need to stop sharp at 11:30 Central European Time. So do we have any final words from maybe Jutta and Torsten?
Yes, thank you so much, Sala, for giving me the floor again, or us the floor again. I will hand over to Torsten in a second. We are really glad that so many people from around the world have joined this webinar today. I think it underlines how important the issues are that are addressed by the Dynamic Coalition on Children's Rights in the digital environment. And as you have seen in the chat, we started nearly 20 years ago at the second IGF with the Dynamic Coalition on Child Online Safety together with ECPAT International. And also it's not only like it's words when we change to children's rights in the digital environment. We really came to the conclusion that it's important to focus on protection, provision, and participation, and that it's more than true when it comes to the question whether children should have access to the digital environment. And over to you, Torsten, for a final word.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jutta. I'm not sure what to say. I think we are at the crucial point in the discussion, and we have so much recommendation at the table everywhere in the world. We are discussing the same issues, the same topics, maybe also the same solutions. And we are in a situation to shape the current or the upcoming solutions together. And therefore, it could be a meaningful place to come together also in the Dynamic Coalition on Children's Rights in Digital Environment. So I would like to invite, as Salah already done, to invite everyone who's not joining the Dynamic Coalition yet to come to the Dynamic Coalition, to subscribe to our email list, to take part in webinars, to follow in the regional initiatives of the Internet Governance Forum, if you are able, also, of course, for the annual conference in Nairobi this year in December. It would be great to see you also, not just on a screen, but maybe also in person. And if we could work together on these topics, that would be really great. Thank you so much also to Salah for moderating the session, for Jutta, for Sonia, and to Amanda to bring in your insights, your expertise, your time, of course. And yeah, thanks for your engagement, and also for the engagement of everyone of you who is joining us, because even if I don't know every one of you, I guess that you are, if you are interested in the field, you will working on that in your respective country and going forward. And yeah, we can support each other. Let's do it. Together. Thanks.
Thank you. Have a nice morning. Have a good day. Have a good afternoon, and have a good evening. I hope to see you all soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
We will share the link to the recording of the webinar with all of you so you can spread it to your community as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Shall we stop the meeting, Salah? Torsten?
Yes.
Yes, okay. We can have a call among us maybe later today.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks.